What's going on, everyone? My name is Dashin Simmons, aka the Food Truck King, and in this video I'm going to share with you how I was able to start a food truck and grow that to $466,000 in sales in just a little over the first year. So in this video, I'm specifically going to be sharing a lot of the pro tips that allowed me to, number one, start my food truck relatively cheap, as well as pro tips on how I was able to grow it to the multiple six-figure mark. I'm going to kind of break down my journey from start to finish and drop in those pro tips as we go. And if you stick to the end of this, you're going to really understand how to be able to start a food truck a lot cheaper, as well as how to actually make sure that when you do open your food truck, that it's actually successful. I did a poll in my free Facebook group recently and asked everyone what they're making on average in sales on an annual basis, and the average answer was $50,000. So to be able to do over $400,000 is definitely out of the ordinary. But again, I'm going to share with you exactly what I've learned to be able to make that happen and how you can apply this for yourself, whether you have a food truck now or you plan on having a food truck sometime in the future. And if you stick to the end of this video, you'll be able to confidently have the keys to be able to grow your own food truck, as well as start one for a lot cheaper. So this is my first official YouTube video. So show me some love and tap the like button and tap the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. So in 2019, I started a business called Susie's Chicken and Fries. I originally started this business with my mom and my cousin. The original plan was that my mom was leaving her corporate job at Outback Steakhouse. And so the plan was for her to open a restaurant and for myself and my cousin to help her with that. But after that fell through, me and my cousin had the bright idea to start a food truck. And in the beginning, my mom wasn't really with it, but after having the opportunity to work on somebody else's food truck for a day, she kind of fell in love with it, and we all decided to team up together and start Susie's Chicken and Fries. So originally, when my mom wanted to start the restaurant, it was going to be a soul food restaurant. But after deciding that we wanted to do a food truck, me and my cousin came up with the idea of doing wings and fries. And that's the first pro tip. Whenever you're starting your food truck, try to primarily focus on one or two main things and go deep with those things versus going wide with those things. So we didn't just have regular chicken wings and regular fries, but we had over 20 different flavors and several different options for top fries. So that's what I mean by going deep and not wide. Most people start a food truck and they try to sell everything in the world, and it's just gonna cause more problems in the long run. If you look at a lot of the large corporations out there, what they primarily do is they focus on that one or two main things, and then they go deep with it. Think about Chick-fil-A for an example. They're the best example of this. Their name is literally Chick-fil-A, as in a chicken, and that's all that they have on the menu. They have chicken salads, chicken sandwich, chicken nuggets, chicken minis, chicken strips, and so they go deep versus going wide. So after finally deciding like, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, we began the process of actually starting. One of the very first things that we did, and this is another pro tip, is to make sure when you want to start a food truck that the first person that you talk to is the health inspector. I see this mistake all the time, where people will go ahead and buy a truck, they'll get their equipment, they'll do all of those things, and then they'll reach out to the health inspector when it's time to do their inspection, and then they realize that the truck that they have, they can't even use. So learn from this mistake and reach out to your health inspector first and let them know exactly what it is that you plan on providing, and they'll tell you everything that you need to be able to legally get started as far as equipment and things like that. So after speaking to the health inspector and knowing exactly what we needed to do to be able to get started, the journey began to search for our food trailer. Here's another pro tip. If you're starting off and you don't really have this surplus of money or an investor or access to a large amount of credit, then what I would recommend for you to do is actually start a food trailer before starting a food truck. So a food truck is going to be a lot more expensive, typically around that $50,000 to $60,000 range. And when it comes to a food trailer, you can literally get a fully built brand new food trailer for $25,000 to $30,000. But here's another pro tip. I would recommend buying your trailer used instead of buying a new one. It's similar to buying a car. You're not typically gonna buy a new car because it loses value the second that you drive out of the parking lot. And a food trailer is similar. What I would do is I would go to Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and things like that, and I would try to find a used food trailer in your area. Depending on the food you're selling and the size and the requirements and things like that, you can seriously find yourself a used trailer for around $15,000. And another thing is, if you don't have access to a lot of money up front, then you have to get creative. I've seen a lot of people actually work out a payment plan with whoever's selling that trailer. And that's actually another perk of buying a used trailer, is because you're buying from a person and you're able to negotiate versus you buying a brand new trailer from this big company. One company I would say to completely stay away from, because I've heard too many horror stories if you do plan on going the new trailer route, is the FUD trailer. I believe they recently rebranded to TFT Co. Watch out for this company. But outside of that, there are so many different places that you can find your food trailer. So we got lucky and we actually had like a friend that happened to be selling his food trailer, and he sold it to us for only $12,000. It looked like poop on the outside, but the inside it looked like gold. So we bought it, and what we did was we ended up getting it wrapped, and that made it look like a new food truck. Another pro tip, whenever you are actually about to buy your trailer, make sure that you're not meeting people with a large amount of cash, because that's opening you up to being robbed. The best thing that you can do is to actually go and get a cashier's check, because they can't steal it from you. And even if they steal it, you can kind of intercept it before that, before they try to cash it. And if they had a brain, they would not try to cash that check. So we were also working on the overall branding, like the logo and the website and the fonts we were going to use and the color schemes that we were going to use, and just really crafting our brand and our brand identity. And that's another pro tip. That's one of the biggest differences between food trucks that are super successful and food trucks that don't really make money, is the branding. Large corporations out there put so much money into their branding for a reason. By having a well-branded company, it's establishing more trust with your customers, and it's making it easier for you to be remembered. So where a lot of people go wrong here is they go to like Fiverr and they pay like $5 for a crappy logo. I have nothing against Fiverr. I use Fiverr all the time. But make sure that you're not cheaping out. Find yourself a good graphic designer and use them for everything. Also, another pro tip is to make sure that when they're making your logo, they're using vectors versus using pixels. And the difference is, when you go to, let's say, blow up your logo, if you use pixels, it's gonna lose quality the bigger and the smaller that you go, versus using vectors, which uses like some sort of mathematical equations that no matter what size you scale your logo to, that it'll always have that same quality. Another pro tip is to get your trailer wrapped. It makes all the difference. So there's a lot of other small things that are super important when it comes to actually starting your food truck. So if you want to learn more about how to start a food truck from scratch and ultimately how to turn your passion for food and cooking into an actual profitable business, if you want somebody to walk you through the steps, if you tap the link below, I actually have what I call my ultimate food truck starter kit. It's a 3-hour course with a whole bunch of free bonuses, and it's literally only $6. And what that's gonna do is gonna walk you through those steps, step by step, of how to be able to start your food truck, even if you don't have a ton of money to start, even if you don't know where to start. So let's continue. So fast forward, after we got through the inspections and the permits and all of the groundwork, we opened up for business. So our first day was at this busy flea market. There was easily 10,000 people there. There was also maybe 10 food trucks there and like 50 other vendors. So on that very first day that we went out, we made $146. We were still excited. We were like, yeah, this is just day one. We're going to come back out. We're going to make all this money. We went to the same spot for day 2 and we made $100. And at this point, we were getting a little nervous. So we were like, all right, let's not go to this spot. Let's go and do another event. But let me remind you, when you're doing events, typically you have to pay a vendor fee. So whether you make money or not, you're still paying. So day 3, went out to another event and we made $73. So we all knew that it couldn't keep going on that way. And actually, before starting my food truck, I owned a marketing agency specifically for restaurants where I would help them use social media to grow their sales. So this was right up my alley. But the first 3 days, my partners didn't really want to spend money on advertising because we had already put out so much money that we were really trying to minimize our expenses. But on day 4, I finally persuaded them to stop doing events and let's find a location to set up at and let's spend money on social media ads. I think I might have spent like $14 on that very first day in advertising, and it turned into $767 in sales. And by no means were we rich, but I definitely saw that we were moving in the right direction. So day 5, we repeated that same process, but instead this time I doubled our advertising budget. And we ended up making $1,900 in just a few hours, and we actually sold out. And let me put in a little pro tip right here. In the beginning of your food truck business, selling out is actually one of the best things that you could do because psychologically people want more of what they can't get. So when it's hard for them to come and try you out, that makes them want to try you out even more. But be careful with this. You have to find the balance because if you're known to sell out every single time, people are going to get tired of that. But it works great in the very beginning. Another pro tip in here is that food truck events are fundamentally flawed because you have to pay to be there. And in the past, that was the only way that food trucks were going to get exposure. But that's not the case today because of social media. And so the pro tip here is by effectively leveraging social media and more specifically advertising on social media and spending money to acquire customers, then you have no need to do events. And we all know that the traditional wisdom in the food truck industry is to do events, but the numbers were painting a completely different picture for me. I genuinely feel like I wouldn't have been able to grow a successful business if I had focused solely on events. And I've noticed people that typically make the least in their food truck heavily rely on events, and it tremendously eats into their profit. A lot of event coordinators demand ridiculous prices. Like recently, I saw that the Monster Jam is charging like 40% of your sales, not your profit, but your sales, and a whole bunch of other limitations. So what I would recommend for you to do when you're starting your food truck is to ditch the events, learn how to effectively market and advertise on social media, and drive your own customers to your food truck business. So in just our very first month, in just half of the first month, we made $9.8 thousand. That very next month, we made $27,000, and we became like the popular food truck in our city. So those sales kept growing and growing until we got to the point where me and my co-founders weren't really getting along. We weren't really seeing eye to eye. So what we did was we ended up separating. At the same time, my mom essentially opened up a restaurant under the same business name, and I took full ownership of the food truck. But then I was met with another problem. Because we were in one city and we had a restaurant and a food truck in that same city, my food truck sales declined tremendously until it got to the point where if it stayed that way, I would be out of business. So what I ended up doing was I started traveling to other cities. And that's another pro tip. If you can get to other cities, you're always going to be that like new truck in the area. And every time you go to that area, especially if you recycle a lot of different areas, then you're always going to be busy. And when I did that, completely exploded my business. But then COVID happened and the world was freaking out. Restaurants were closing left and right. And we were honestly a little worried because we didn't really know how this thing was going to go. And so while most people were closing down their trucks, closing down their restaurants, I actually went into the opposite direction. And instead of cutting back, I doubled down on everything. I added online ordering as well as doubled my advertising budget. And I went from $15,000 in 1 month to $32,000 the next month. And that's another pro tip. When you're doing advertising and you're doing it effectively, it's essentially free. What I figured out was that roughly every dollar that I would spend on Facebook ads would turn into $14 more. So that's when I said, okay, if I increase my advertising budget, then obviously my sales are going to increase. And I was right. And so I consistently kept doing that, doing $30,000 a month, $35,000 a month, and that number just kept growing. We got super popular. We won the best food truck in our city like 2 years in a row. I won top 20 under 40 business professionals. We were on the news left and right. Everybody was talking about us. But then I was met with another problem. I was making great money, but I had reached my limit. I couldn't spend any more money on advertising to bring more customers because I couldn't service all the customers that I had. So what made all the difference for me was when I started studying my numbers viciously. And that's a pro tip for you. You have to be hyper aware of your numbers because your numbers are gonna paint a picture for you. 1 + 1 is always gonna equal 2. So by looking at your numbers, you're gonna be able to tell where you can make improvements in your food truck. And so one of the numbers that was really getting in the way was our wait time, because the second that I would open my food truck, everybody would start lining up. And since we were serving chicken wings, you know, the cook time on that was about 13 minutes. So I had to figure out a way to be able to serve more people and to serve more people faster. And that's when I made the investment in a fryer that cost me like $1,200, but allowed me to get out an extra 250 wings, which then lowered my wait time and increased the amount of customers that I could serve, therefore resulting in more money. And that's another pro tip, is you have to invest your money to solve problems within the business. And where most people go wrong is they're so afraid to invest that money, but when you invest money into the right things, typically it's gonna bring more in return. So that $1,200 investment turned into thousands and thousands of dollars, and overall better service for my customers. So I was able to serve more customers and ultimately make more money. But then I was met with another issue where I was getting completely burnt out and food wasn't coming out as fast and efficiently as I knew it could. So then what I started doing is I started hiring people like crazy, to the point where I had 5 or 6 people working on my truck at a time. And that's another area where people really go wrong at in their food truck, is they try to do everything, but it's impossible for you to do everything. And ultimately, you're gonna make more money when you have other people taking off some of that load for you, because you can then focus on other important things. And after I started hiring people, I was met with another problem of really getting the most out of these people and doing it in a way that they didn't constantly have to depend on me. So then what I started doing was I started putting systems and standard operating procedures in place. And that's another pro tip. A lot of people like to run their food truck as what I call a homeboy business. But what you have to do is you have to treat it like a big business, and you have to do what other large companies out there are doing, because they do it for a reason, because it works. So that's a short version on how I was able to take my food truck from zero to $466,000 in sales in a little over a year. But again, this is my first YouTube video and I plan on posting so many more. But what I want you to understand is that I'm here for you. So what would help me out tremendously is if you would let me know down in the comments what exactly you want to learn. What do you want to see? What questions do you have when it comes to starting and growing a profitable food truck business? I appreciate you for watching. Make sure to tap the subscribe button. Make sure to tap the like button, and I will see you guys soon. How's that sound? I sound like a fucking YouTuber. I almost said, what's up? It's your boy.